Hey there, November 6th, Nano Day 6, it's Sherry Gorman coming to you. Today someone asked me to talk about publishing, and so I had this rule, and I know you heard it before, that I was never going to retake a video, but I did the whole video and I did traditional publishing and then I talked about self-publishing, and it turned out to be way too long. So this is the only time I'm going to go back and have do-overs. So anyway, I learned my lesson. I'm going to talk about traditional publishing today and then go into self-publishing tomorrow. Just to preface things, I am much more familiar with self-publishing because that's how I published my first and only published book. It's nothing personal. My other two books, the one that I'm editing now and nearly finished with, and the one I'm starting with NaNoWriMo, I plan on hopefully both carrying through the traditional process. So I am not an expert, and very much less an expert on traditional publishing than I am on self-publishing. But that being said, I did a ton of research at the time that it was for me to make that decision, and so I do know some things, and so I'll pass on what I know, and hopefully it'll help you out, and if not, there's always Google. As far as traditional publishing goes, I think the major disadvantages, first of all, time. It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and probably a lot of heartbreak. You start the process by sending out query letters that go to agents, and mostly from what I hear, you get a lot of rejections. Hopefully after several months of sending out these letters, someone bites, someone decides to give you a break, someone likes the idea of your book, and they decide to pick you up. So now you've gone through all this, you think that you're home free, you have an agent. Well, you're not even close. The agent then goes and farms your book out to publishers that they know, and so the publishers take a look at your book, and the process basically starts all over again. Do they like it? Are they going to bite? Are they going to turn it down? And then that process can take quite a while. I think the best case scenario, and it's probably worth mentioning just if you want to keep that dream alive, which I always think about sometimes when crossing my fingers and rubbing my my magic sea rock, or my lucky sea rock, I guess I should say, is that the really lucky people who have a great book, the agents will farm it out to publishers, and the best case scenario that can happen is just like put your house up for sale and 8 people want to buy it at once. Your book actually goes to auction and the highest bidder wins. It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen, and I can just imagine that if you were one of those lucky few, how great that would be. So, that's a dream, and we all have to dream. We have to keep things alive. So, just keep it in your back pocket. Know that it's probably unlikely, but it's out there. So then, as far as how things go from there, when a publisher decides that they like your book, then you go through the publishing house. You go through their editorial staff. They design a book cover for you. They may send you out on a publicity tour, probably more likely to happen after the book release. But there's a lot of things that have to happen. They have to go through a budget committee. So from the time that you start the process with beginning to send out query letters to the time that you actually will see your book on a shelf in a bookstore is typically a very long time, 18 to 24 months even. And so that, I think, is one of the major disadvantages to traditional publishing. One of the other disadvantages is lack of control. For some people, that's really important. They don't want somebody coming in and telling them, an editor, say, from the publishing house, how to write their book or what parts need changed, or even if the title doesn't work or a character needs to be axed. A lot of people get very protective over their work, and that's a very difficult part. For me, I just want to make my book the best book that I possibly can. So I don't see that as a huge problem, but I think it's worth mentioning because I know for some people it could be an issue. Other disadvantages with a traditional publisher, I guess there is a little uncertainty. I've read stories where the book is accepted, it goes through the editing process, through the design of the book cover, it's almost ready to be put on paper and sent out the door, and then something happens within the company, something that you'll probably never ever hear the truth about. It's just big corporate America, but the book's axed. And so you're basically starting over after all that time invested, after your hopes and dreams are pinned upon this process that looks like it's going forward and there's no glitches, and then all of a sudden the rug falls out from underneath you. So, hopefully that is less often the case than more often. I do think it's rare, but it's something that I came across in my studies and my research, and so I thought, it's probably worth passing on. Advantages to self-publishing, I think probably one of the, as I see it now, looking back after having self-published and having tried to promote a book all by myself without a publicity crew, and try to write my own press release and basically a DIY kind of venture, I think having the backing of a publishing house is critical. Those people know what they're doing. The publicity agents, they've done this. They do it every single day, and so they're good. And so you have access to that. Throwing a disadvantage along those lines, though, is one thing that I have read is that, like every dollar is limited, and publicity dollars are limited as well. So a lot of times, if you're especially a new author or a first-time author, the publishing house might not throw a lot of publicity dollars your way. They'll give it to the big names, the John Grishams and the Jane Pattersons and the guys who are established. But even if they give you some dollars and some access to their crew, that's better than nothing, and it's certainly better than doing it blindlessly on your own. So something to consider. For me, I'm going with if I get one present for Christmas, that's better than no presents at all. Other things, you get access to their editorial staff, which I mentioned could be a downside, but editors are expensive, and I have one who's awesome. I can't wait to send my second book off to her and hopefully come up with something phenomenal. But I think the editors at the publishing houses must be awesome too, and you don't have to shell out hundreds, if not thousands, of dollars of your own money in order to get your book edited, because the publishing house will do it on their dollar. I think another huge advantage is that the publishing houses, they have access to the big names. And by big names, I mean mostly big name reviewers, talking about Midwest Book Reviews, LA Times, Miami Herald, People, Newsweek, Kirkus, all of those big name people don't want to pay any attention to independent authors, and in a way I can't blame them. It's sad to say, and I'm not being mean to anybody, but there's a lot of books out there that are independently published that just suck, and there's a lot of great books that are independently published. But if you're a reviewer and that's your job, is to invest several hours in this book and come up with a review that's going to gather public attention and be something that people want to read, people don't want to read about a book that sucked. People want to read about a book that's great. And it's easier to come up with that kind of review when you are looking at an author who's proven himself than one that hasn't. So, I think it's easier to gather that attention if you have a major publisher behind you, if you've got your book in the hands of someone who knows what they're doing. Let's see, I think going along the lines, I did just think of one more disadvantage, and that's profits. I think between the agent and the publisher, one of the big complaints is they take a huge chunk of your pie. And I've heard estimates you end up with 8 to 10% of what you earn. If you go, which we'll talk about tomorrow, self-publishing, that percentage goes way, way up. But then you have to look at who's seeing your book and who's buying your book. And if you have the backing of a publishing house, if you sell 100 cars, or if you sell one car and you make more money off that one car than you did off of each of the 100 cars, but you still sold more $100 cars, you're making more money even if you have to give more away. And that's the way I look at traditional publishing. I just think it's really hard to break out of the crowd with self-publishing, and so I'm hoping that traditional publishing works for me, and I'm hoping that they like what I have to offer, and that I'm able to become successful in something that I really love. So at the conclusion, not to make this too long because I already did that once and I don't want to go back and do this video again, but those are the things that I've researched, things that I've heard from people. It's by all means not every advantage and every disadvantage, but it is pretty inclusive. And Google and research and get on forums and talk to people. Writers are a wonderful group of folks, and they're willing to share on Facebook and Twitter, and then I'm sure there's tons of other research forums. And then Nano, get on Nano and ask around and ask what people's thoughts are. But for me and from my perspective and from my experience, that's kind of what I've come up with. So anyway, catch you tomorrow. Aloha, mahalo, have a great evening. Bye.